Would people like Randall Nickerson, do you think any of these experiences are happening in sort of like a dream state and not a physical reality? Like it's not like people like beings aren't actually landing in his front yard and going in there and taking him. Maybe this is all happening like within a different realm inside of his mind.
Yeah, and and I run this program, a doctoral program, and on integral noetic sciences, which is basically the study of consciousness through a scientific lens. And in that program, there is a concentration students can do called anomalous studies. And that's the kind of thing we look at and explore and study in that context. So I have a doctoral student who, focuses a lot on dreams, but not dreams in the normal sense, more like, dreams like you're talking about, where there seem to be other realms that people are in. And it's not so much a dream, but it's what's often referred to as the imaginal. The imaginal is an objective realm that's kind of initially seems dreamlike, but it's like, it's not the objective world as we think of it around us right now, but it's an objective, subtle realm that you can get to. And you can get to it through different protocols, or you can get to it through the dream space. And so there's this, and this is another example of the phenomenon being double, like the doubleness I was talking about. A lot of encounters occur in what I call the subtle zone. And the subtle zone is what you were just describing as a possibility for Randall, is that it's dreamlike, it's not necessarily physical, but it's real, but it's another realm. Or even the DMT elves, right? When you take different, sacred medicines and hallucinogenics, and you often go to these realms that are real realms. They appear dreamlike in the sense that they're subtle. The subtle realms are much more dynamic than the physical realm, but part of what makes them different than the dream realm is that there's a level of stability and coherence that usually is not the same as in the dream space, right? The dream space seems to be, it changes much more, right? It's more kind of dynamic in that sense. Whereas the subtle realms, like, because sometimes people will talk about they take DMT and they have an experience, and then a year later they do it again and they go right back to where they were in that previous trip, right, almost as if no time has passed, right? So, right, you don't have that so much in like the dream space, that kind of constancy, or, and so the phenomenon, like if you look at abductions, it seems like a lot of abductions are physical abductions. You have reports of the spouse saying, I woke up and he or she wasn't next to me. They weren't outside. Their body was gone. Their physical body was gone. And then, it showed up like boom, like that, and was there again, right? So there are cases and reports and enough evidence that lead us to believe that some abductions are in fact physical. But a lot of others seem to be happening in the subtle zone, which is basically they're taking your subtle body out of your physical body, and your subtle body, and when you're in your subtle body, it's like you're in a dream. Like you can see yourself, you can interact with things. Like you're in a body, but it's just an energetic body that's able to kind of go into these other dimensions. So like when you take, like DMT, and you find yourself in another realm, you're in your subtle body, right? You can think of it as your dream body, like the body you have when you're in dreams. But it's, in fact, the dream body is our astral body, and we can use that same body to go into these other realms, right? And there's other bodies, like the mental body and the causal body, that allow you to go into different realms, right? So a lot of the phenomena is this mix of it's occurring kind of, just like we have a lucid dream where you can wake up in the dream, the opposite can happen where you're awake here right now and you're also dreaming. Right? You're also in a dream state. Like the subtle realm is kind of bleeding through and mixing with the physical realm. So like when people talk about the Oz factor, like they have this experience of an encounter with a UFO and it all goes silent, and the crickets stop and this stop, like it's just kind of like this eerie silence. To me, that's an indication that they've likely entered into the subtle zone where they're in this liminal space that is in part physical because they're still in the forest or they're still on the side of the road. Like the physical world that they were in is there, but kind of overlaid and interpenetrating with that world are these other realities. and that these beings sometimes are in that realm. They're not fully in the physical realm. Sometimes they can come into the physical realm, but it takes a lot of energy and effort sometimes to fully manifest into the physicality of, what we would think of as material realm. And so sometimes it's easier or better for them to stay in this energetic state and bring us into that energetic state, through our subtle bodies. And so I think, and this is part of what makes talking about and understanding what's happening so confusing, because we have this very strong view of a physical world and that's the only world there is.
Yeah.
I think part of what's helpful when you start realizing this kind of larger esoteric cosmology where these other realms and dimensions are around and available, and how they operate and how beings in them use them and how those realms interface with this realm, I think you're right that a lot of experiences are occurring in the subtle realms or in this liminal space, this imaginal realm. It doesn't mean it's happening in the mind, because sometimes it can be, absolutely. I mean, and fantasy and delusion is mixed in with a lot of this, right? But in the authentic cases, the person's basically just going into that realm with their subtle body, whereas their physical body remains in this realm. And then they're in that body and walking around, interacting with these beings. And that sometimes the implants are even energetic implants into that subtle body. So they're not even like physical in the way that we would think of physicality. And then when that subtle body goes back and integrates with the physical body, they have an implant, but it's not necessarily a physical implant that you would find under a microscope. It might be like kind of a technology that's created out of etheric matter that only can be seen and experienced and in that frequency.
Real implants you've seen?
Well, I haven't seen, but I know there's been a lot of good research on real implants, physical implants, but I also know that some implants are not physical in that sense, but are like energetic.
Right. And somehow they can manifest from whatever other thing our brain is constructing when we're asleep or in some other state into a physical state.
Yeah.
What sort of evidence is there, like physical evidence is there of experiencers having implants?
You can feel them sometimes under the skin. They've been x-rayed. They've been surgically removed. They're often, very tiny, like Roger Lear, Dr. Lear, studied a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Whitley Strieber talks about how the implant in his ear moved around and then, so he can feel it. And, so there's, sometimes there's scars, sometimes there's scoop marks, that appear overnight. And it's kind of like, I didn't have that yesterday. And now all of a sudden I have a scoop mark of a wound that would have taken 2 weeks generally to heal, but it's like it's there overnight. So there can be body marks, so there's a lot of different kinds of circumstantial and suggestive evidence. And there's been physical implants removed. I think there's at least 20 that have been documented and studied.
And what did they determine those things were when they were removed?
Yeah, and this is part of what's interesting with the phenomena. It's like often when they've been removed, the studies have been inconclusive, or it's been like organic matter, or just typical metals that you find on this planet.
Yeah.
Right. And so then that becomes a basis from which to dismiss it.
Right.
And maybe that's justified, but there's enough other elements to the story that make you should maybe be thoughtful about dismissing it, because sure, we don't understand it, but given all the other bits, like it seems like maybe something's going on.